Hey, I'm Rev James. I'm an Orthodox Christian priest and a stand-up comic. I'm also the host of God Wants You to Laugh podcast. So the God Wants You to Laugh podcast, I interview spiritual comedians and funny religious leaders, and we're having a conversation about the relationship between comedy and spirituality and how the two enrich one another. It's an exploration pretty much, and it's deep. It's also funny. That's kind of the podcast in a nutshell.
What is your goal with this podcast?
My goal is for people to have fun listening to it, but also to have a spiritually enriching experience that they can have while they're driving their car, while they're doing their laundry. I mean, you can do all sorts of things while listening to a podcast. So it's an opportunity to have a spiritual experience that's fun while you're going about your life. And I hope it also touches your heart and makes you feel more connected to what you see as God. And that's also why I try to have as many perspectives on the podcast. I mean, I've interviewed a rabbi, I've interviewed a Muslim. I want to interview as many perspectives as possible because I believe God can be found in every religious and spiritual tradition. And I've always been naturally fascinated with talking to people about different faiths and people who are just different from me. Like, diversity of perspectives is a good and awesome thing and can also enrich our own perspectives.
How did you go about finding the people to interview?
There are people I knew as a clergy person who does stand-up comedy. There weren't too many of us, so whenever I discovered somebody who was a clergy person and a stand-up, I was like, I want to talk to that person. I want to know who that person is. So that's how I found Bob Alper. That's how I found Susan Sparks. That's also how I found Dwight. I had reached out to them kind of as mentors. They're all a little older than me, and I just wanted to get to know them more. And I love comedy and I love talking about spirituality. So I love talking to comedians about their spirituality. Gibran knew Bob and Susan. I knew Corday he's a fellow comic on the scene here in San Francisco. I Googled spiritual comedian and Alicia came up and emailed her. And I already knew Bishop Selders. He's my bishop and he's hilarious, as you will soon find out. And Brian was kind of my hero as a kid. He was a stand-up comic and he was a counselor at a church camp. So he just seemed like a natural, perfect fit for the podcast.